Hi, it's Gwyn and welcome back to the channel. As a second generation Beatles fan, I grew up in the 1970s here in the UK. Some describe this period as the time that taste forgot, when flared trousers were wider than doorways, shirt collars made you a literal flight risk, and the national colour was orange. I navigated my way through the eras of glam rock, disco and punk, settling on a musical preference from the previous decade, and particularly the Beatles. How lucky was I? By the time I had an interest in music and thought about buying the albums of the Beatles, it was these stereo pressings with their nondescript EMI box labels that were the go-to offering. I wouldn't have given a second thought to buying a mono version of the albums when stereo was available to me. And yet, as we're all too aware, these stereo versions of the albums was given little to no thought when it came to their mixing by EMI or the Beatles. They concentrated their efforts on the mono versions, and as a result, the stereo mixes were inherently flawed. Vocals on one channel, instrumentation on the other, sloppy editing, and multitude of small variances between the mono and stereo versions, all contributing to an imperfect result. A perfectly remixed version of these stereo albums is still elusive, and perhaps this is something that Tom Green, the new CEO at Apple, will put on his release schedule as he settles into his office at Apple HQ. It was, however, the result I grew up with and loved and is ingrained in my memory. When I think of a Beatles song in my head, it's the stereo versions that I can hear. In the years that followed, I discovered the mono versions, obviously, and appreciated them, but it's difficult to see past what is essentially part of me. Maybe until now. Now, I've absolutely absorbed this box set over the last few weeks, playing through these albums as nature intended. This is a big box set, to say the least. Let me start with the packaging. Full credit, the packaging on arrival was superbly protected and got to me on the day of release, which was absolutely fantastic. The box replicates the 2014 edition, which I didn't buy at the time and severely regretted it almost immediately. But what we've learned from the superb Andrew of Parlogram is that the differences between the 2014 edition and the 2025 edition are limited to the back page of the album leaflet and the thickness of the foam insert. Nice. Each album replicates the original albums with authentic flip-back sleeves and beautiful Parlophone and Apple labels. The quality of materials, print and finishing on the copies that I have are faultless, though there are reports of some QC issues, particularly to those in the US market. But I've got to say, I'm absolutely delighted with my copies. I have no print issues on covers or labels, no scratches or blemishes on the vinyl records themselves, and all of them sit perfectly flat on the turntable. The LPs are protected by one of these cellophane sleeves, which has an adhesive strip on it which can damage the sleeve, so please be careful. I've chosen to remove these and I'll get rid of them, to be honest, as I know many of you have chosen to do. I think the box itself is ample protection. Now, I'm not going to review these albums one by one. We'd be here for ages, and if you're watching this channel, I'd expect that you're more than familiar with these albums and they're like familiar friends to you. But let me highlight some of the things that I noticed as I listened through the albums. Firstly, mono seems to concentrate impact on the introductions to songs, particularly on tracks on some of the earlier albums. The gut punch that was delivered when I heard I Saw Her Standing There, Roll Over Beethoven, Hard Day's Night and Any Time at All particularly hit me. There seems to be a rounded fullness and richness of vocals, particularly on tracks like Babies in Black, Yesterday and Here, There and Everywhere, which are absolutely sublime. The mono version of Revolver is perhaps where there is a markedly different offering. Previous albums may have had the odd mix tweak here and there, but differences on sound effects on I'm Only Sleeping, Got to Get You Into My Life, and an altogether different take of Tomorrow Never Knows makes the listening experience quite different. I love listening to Revolver in mono, and it cements it as my favourite album. Sgt. Pepper's also provided stark variances on some noticeable tracks, with vocal effects on Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, and speed differences between the mono and stereo versions of She's Leaving Home being at the fore. There are also significant differences in the crowd effects on the Sgt. Pepper reprise. Just to highlight the priority here, George Martin admitted that they dedicated 3 weeks to the mixing of the mono version of Sgt. Pepper and only 3 days on the stereo version. That says it all, really. As far as a listening experience goes, I found the Magical Mystery Tour LP to be the most disappointing in terms of audible quality. Now, I love myself some bass, but this sounded bass heavy to me, as if the sound had been wrapped in a blanket, with tracks missing really the clarity and sparkle of the stereo mixes in my view. I did love Baby You're a Rich Man, however, though that might have been because I hadn't heard it in ages, and what a great track it is. Now for the White Album. By this time in their recording career, the stereo and mono versions were given pretty much equal attention by the Beatles and EMI, though there are still notable variances to Don't Pass Me By, Helter Skelter and Long, Long, Long. The shorter Helter Skelter being particularly jarring to my ears, and there are no blisters on Ringo's fingers on the mono mix. Now, while I enjoyed the mono experience, I wouldn't necessarily place this above the stereo version, where there is an enlarged soundscape, but I guess some tracks in mono do sound grittier and more direct, particularly Yer Blues, which is bloody marvellous in mono. Perhaps my highlight was listening to the Mono Masters album. The triple album set just throbbed with intensity and impact. She Loves You, Long Tall Sally, She's a Woman, Bad Boy, Yes It Is, I'm Down and Rain. Whew. For me, they were just awesome. I guess for me, this highlights that for my ears in particular, the earlier tracks benefit from the mono mix, whereas the later tracks for my ears prefer the stereo option. The accompanying book, authored by Kevin Howlett, is a marvellous addition to the box set too, presenting short summaries of each of the albums included, with some terrific photos and ephemera relating to each of the albums' release. Promotional material, session photos, newspaper clippings, recording documents, all providing context for the time of release. Once again, the quality of production is second to none. So, the last 3 Beatle releases that I've bought have been the Hard Day's Night on white vinyl, the Beatles US albums in mono, and now this, the Beatles in mono box set. And while each of these have been nice releases in their own way, they've hardly delivered anything new, and they are perhaps a sign of Apple treading water to some extent. It's approaching 3 years since we had the release of the Revolver box set, and Beatle fans are starting to get a bit twitchy. So let's hope that Tom Green can now oversee something a bit more dynamic and get the re-release programme back on track, hopefully with Rubber Soul. But rumours of the anthology revamp aren't going away, and this could be the first thing that Green will oversee. But please don't take my last comments being a sign of being ungrateful. I'm delighted to have this mono box set. It's something I really wish I'd got the first time round, and I'm grateful to add it to the shelving behind me. All in all, this is a quality item in every respect, and as far as a rating goes, this is nothing but a 5 stars for me. So, were you fortunate enough to get a copy of this box set? Maybe it wasn't of interest to you at all. If it was though, how have you found it? Why not share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below? It is possible, however, you could have been part of the unlucky crowd who only discovered on the day before release that you wouldn't be receiving your copy until September. I know exactly how I would have felt if I had got that notification. Well, I'm calling time on this episode, but before I go, if I can just encourage you to like, subscribe and sign up for notifications so that you can keep engaged with our content and support the good work of our channel. I'll be back next week with another fab episode, but until then, it's Bye for now.